Good evening. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to try to stand in a position that does not make these poor speakers scream. So thank you all, and I'd like to thank Commissioner Talbert for sponsoring this business summit. My name is Dina Archuleta. I am the Interim Economic Development Director for Bernalillo County, and I'm so happy to get to see you all today. As you know, the Commission, county leadership, and my department work tirelessly to make sure that we're assisting businesses to develop and grow in our community. We do those through financial incentives that cover a wide range of services. This is not the most convenient way to stand, so I apologize. Promoting our talented workforce that you know we have in New Mexico and here, especially here in Albuquerque. And this is exactly why we're having this event tonight. We want to make sure that we can foster special connections between our retirees and our new businesses. We want to make sure that folks can connect and develop. It is our goal to help achieve a greater successful community. So please allow me to introduce, if you would, my staff, and they're all standing in the back there. I have Marcos Gonzalez, who is our manager, our economic development manager. Correct, Marcos? I think that's right. Dan Beeman, our special projects coordinator, who puts up with me just sort of randomly giving him things to do. Sean Perry-Turner, who coordinated all of this tonight, and a special thanks to her for all her hard, really heavy lift on this, and thank you so much. And Sulema Lenz, who is our office manager and pretty much corrals all of us and gets us in order and in line. And thank you. Please make sure you get some time to spend with the staff and interact with them when you have some time. I'd also like to introduce some of our special guests and our special leadership here. Julie Baca is sitting in the back. So I can ask you to stand. Julie Baca is our county manager for Bernalillo County, who lets us do all these fun things and actually helps us coordinate this. So thank you, Julie. I'd also like to introduce some of our special guests that we have here tonight. Nancy Bierce, County Treasurer. Misty Willow Parks, I saw you oh, there she is. Misty is our, I'm going to say this wrong, you're our probate judge, correct? Yes, thank you. I'd also like to introduce Ken Scott, Deputy County Treasurer. Richard Clark, who is our, there you are, hi Richard, our Emergency Management Director. And if I've missed somebody, I apologize profusely, I'm not sure. I see other folks here, so thank you all for being here tonight. Teresa Baca Sandoval. Hi, Teresa is one of our county attorneys. Very nice to have you here. Thank you. Before we will, I'd like to introduce our host for tonight and give you a little bit of about his background. He'll not like any of this, but it's very shy, you know. This is Commissioner Lonnie Talbert, who has served District 4 since 2013. Not 19 something, but 2013. So well. He doesn't age ever. And he's dedicated to constituent services, job creation, and economic development. And I'll tell you, he is one of our strongest supporters in economic development. So I thank you for that, Commissioner. He's also sits on community schools, the Rio Metro Transit Board, the Albuquerque Economic Development Board, and is the chairman of the ABCGC, which is the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission. He sits on Innovate Albuquerque's board and the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority. He is a magna cum laude graduate from Jacksonville University in Jacksonville, Florida. And when he was 12, no, just kidding. I could go on and on, but with that, I would like to welcome and thank our host for this evening, Commissioner Lonnie Talbert.
Thanks, Dina. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dina. Really appreciate it. And, she uses the word interim. Honestly, right now, Mei-Ling Armijo is in Africa serving our country so proudly, and so we support and thank her, and there is no interim. When you get into a job, it's like you got the job, right? So Dina's got the job, and I'm going to take a personal liberty real quick because today is her birthday. Aww, so I want us all to say happy birthday. She's going to shout out that I went to school in 1986. I'm just going to say happy birthday. I won't even talk about age, okay? We're just going to leave that alone. We're just going to Exactly. We do. Right. I'm so honored to be here tonight. This is one of the most fun things we get to do as commissioners, which is get in the community and engage all of you in hopefully topics that bring value to what you're doing either in your career or your life, or just maybe something that you want to learn a little more about. And Sean Perry and Marcos and Dan and Sulema and Mei Ling, who's not here, and now Dina, have just done an amazing job at really surveying what's going on in Bernalillo County and our city and saying what's important to people, what makes a difference. And that's why we're here tonight. So we're talking about colliding into the future. The future is right now, right? We've got the largest percentage of people retiring in the history of our country, the baby boomers. Now, in talking to a few people today, what does retirement mean? Does it mean I quit forever? Does it mean I just don't go in? But I got to tell you, the thing with retirement is for most people who have worked their entire life, they can't stop. They don't know what to do. I mean, I know many people who literally say they've retired and are bored out of their freaking minds because they can't play enough golf and they can't play enough bridge and they can't eat enough breakfasts and they're just done. They're like, what do I do, right? So thank God tonight we have three very important people in our community who are going to talk a little bit about how they, retirees, can collide with the startup community that is in desperate need of talent. Because everyone has these great ideas, they have these awesome products and services, this amazing technology, but they don't have a workforce yet that has that experience. They may have the intellectual capacity, most likely they do. Hey, how are you? Thanks for being here, man. She used to be with the county. They have that intellectual, they have that knowledge they've gained, but they don't have the experience of working with an entire new group of people that I think you can bring others in to help learn, teach, and promote. And I'm going to call out a friend of mine here, Trish Lopez, because her entire company is just the opposite of what we're talking about today. Her company is taking young people, millennials, young high school, probably some in college, and going out and teaching the retired community, I won't use the word old, I'll say retired community, how to use technology. And I got to tell you, the fastest growing group of people buying iPhones and iPads and using Facebook isn't kids anymore. Kids aren't on Facebook. They're like, oh, I don't need that. They want Snapchat or Twitter or whatever other new thing. But Facebook is being used by seniors, and they need to learn how to use it, but they can't even use it because they don't even know how to use their iPhone because they're afraid. Her group. So again, this is what all these things that are going on around us every day. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Normally, most of you know I don't read, but because I can read, I actually can. Thank God. But I normally don't read things because I speak from the heart, and that's what I try to do. But I don't want to miss some of these things for this esteemed panel, so I will read some of the highlights. But I also want to make sure I recognize, because after this panel, we're going to have some roundtable discussions. So I just want to tell you, our facilitators tonight for our roundtable discussion will be Jill Avey with Southwestern HR Consulting, John Martinez, NMSBA Program, Sandia National Laboratories, Margarita Garin, I apologize if I butchered that, I'm sorry, with West, Mark Gilboard with West, Tim Harjo, Director, Small Business Development Center, Harjo, thank you, sir, Harjo, Gabe Mounts with USAF, AFRL, NM, a lot of initials, NM Tech Engagement, Daniel Harone, CNM, Courtney Rich, The Mixing Bowl, and Amanda Davis. Please, let's give it up for our roundtable facilitators. And then now finally I'll introduce our panel and we'll get started and we'll start taking some questions and really give them each a minute just to talk a little about maybe what colliding in the future means to them and then what you really want to hear about, because I think that's the most important part. So first, right here in the red tie, Mr. Rob DelCampo, Dr. Rob DelCampo. This is his building, so to speak. This is the Lobo Rainforest that the Innovation Academy for University of New Mexico is housed in. So this building was built on a partnership with UNM to house the Innovation Academy. And it was one of those things where when Rob started this program, he thought, oh, maybe we'll get a couple hundred people. I think it's 900 or 1,000. How many?
Like 850.
All right, 850. I rounded up. I like 1,000 better. It's 1,000. By the end of the night, it'll be 20,000. Yeah. The entire university's Innovation Academy, right? It's all of them. But Rob is a homegrown talent, did his schooling here, Las Cruces, went out of state, got some additional degrees, but came back home because he believed in New Mexico. And I appreciate that. Everyone wants to talk about the brain drain. Everybody wants to talk about everybody leaving, okay? Well, here's someone who didn't leave. And you're going to meet two other people who didn't leave. So thank you, Dr. DelCampo, so much for being here tonight. We also got Lisa J. Adkins. So Lisa runs FatPipe, which is literally right across the street. What is FatPipe? It's a business accelerator, business incubator, but that's only one of her jobs. She has like 10 of them. The other one is she is the COO for the BioScience Center. So she works with Stuart Rose looking at commercializing our huge opportunity with bioscience, things coming out of the labs, things coming out of UNMH, and making sure that that talent and those patents and those products and services stay here in New Mexico as well. She also has started many businesses, and I think the one of them, I want to make sure I get it right here, because it was in here, Ingenuity Software. So on the software side as well. So thank you to Lisa J. Adkins for being here tonight as well. And then finally, oh, thank you. Finally, last but not least, Brian Terrell. Brian is Vice President at HB Construction, but Brian has traveled the country. He has lived in Switzerland. He has lived in Spain, Venezuela, Mexico, Uruguay, and has spent his life training and business developing in not only these other countries, but also here in America. And he left for a while, about 12 years, but he came back because I know his wife. They wanted to be back near family. They wanted to raise their kids here. But what an experience to have children outside of the U.S., give them that experience, but then bring them back home to New Mexico and allow them to have the rich heritage that we have here as well. So thank you to Brian for being here as well tonight. I don't even need this thing. I don't even think it's working. Hear me. You can.
I think it was for the television,
Oh, you need that?
possibly.
Do I need to hold that, Paul?
You're being
Okay.
live
Yeah, I need to
fed.
hold it. We're live, okay. Anyway, so colliding into the future. What does that really mean, and how is that impacting New Mexico? I'd like just each of our panelists to take a couple minutes, give their perspective on what they think it means, and then we can open up to a few questions, because I really want this to be interactive. They are all well prepared and have lots of skills, but I think rather than just be talking heads, they'll be interactive heads. I think that'll be better. So, Dr. DelCampo, what are your thoughts?
All right, thanks so much. Thanks for coming tonight. Welcome to the Lobo Rainforest. Hopefully you enjoy your time here this evening. We're happy to have you all. So in terms of talking about colliding to the future and intergenerational dynamics, one of my academic interests, and I won't go into a 2.5-hour lecture for you guys, is in multi-generational dynamics. And we actually wrote a book a couple years ago about how different generations work together, the value that can be derived by that, but also some of the problems. So today, for the first time, we actually have 5 generations in the workforce at the same time. And that's never happened before. Just 2 years ago, I was saying that same thing, and I was saying for the first time ever, we have 4 generations in the workforce at the same time. So it continues to grow and grow and grow. And what's interesting, what we find is, just like you might see in your families of origin, when generations are close together, all right, there's a lot of strife. So millennials and Gen Xers like myself don't get along too well, right? But when they're a little bit spread apart, so baby boomers and millennials, for example, we see a lot of value derived from those relationships. So the further apart they are, actually the more similarities they have. And there's stuff we could talk about with social phenomena and how the pendulum swings from one area to the other. Real quick example I'll give you is, so a Gen Xer like myself, we're the dual income families, right? We're the institutionalized childcare. We're the latchkey kids. You know, I had the string with the key on it, so when I came home, I'd come and let myself in. The parents not quite as involved because they're out working. Well, what did we see with the next generation? Well, rather than come to some level of normalcy with parental interaction, they swing all the way back the other way and are the helicopter parents, right? And there's many of you guys, so.
Where's my daughter right now?
Exactly.
I gotta find her
I think
phone.
she just texted you.
She just
Yeah. But
Hey,
what's
Dad,
interesting,
can you bring me dinner? She's
Yeah.
25. Come on.
it happens. So the opportunity for folks to work together, particularly in the startup community, is really exciting. And there's lots of ways that you might not think about these opportunities can really be realized. A real life example that we had happen just a couple of weeks ago. I got connected to a woman who retired to Albuquerque from somewhere in North Carolina. She used to be an English professor at the University of Chicago, and got a friend of a friend sent me an email and said, hey, can we go have a cup of coffee? And I said, sure. She sat down with me and she's like, look, I need something to do. I'm retired. I don't want to work. I don't want to get paid, but I've got a lot of skills. And she was actually super prepared, and she had this whole list of things she could do and grant proposals and this and that. And I'm like, I just met you. This is just a first date. I'm not quite ready there. But it turns out she had taught English at the University of Chicago. And so I said, hey, do you want to come down to the rainforest once a week and just kind of sit down and help out students with either their English papers, or more specifically in our program, grant applications or some other things that you're working on? She said, sure, that'd be great. So we brought her down for a couple of weeks now, and she's got a line sort of out the door, and she's loving it and having a great time. And kids are bringing her coffee from Starbucks and all this sort of stuff. And that's a very limited way that you're seeing these generations collide, but they get along super well. There's lots of benefit to be derived, and she's really enjoying the work that she's doing, taking her skill set and applying it in a different environment, right? So these students are giving her, one of our students has a grant proposal around some technology that he developed. He's applying to the federal government, and she knows nothing about the technology, although now she knows a little more, but she knows how to put together a grant proposal. And they're working together, and the past couple weeks, it's been 2 hours with those guys. It's like, hey, we got more people to help out here. Let's move on here. So there's lots of opportunities like that, particularly in the startup community, which is sort of the chosen economic development strategy that the city, the county, the state is really focusing on right now, because of the startup activity and the fact that Ford Motor Company is not going to show up and hire 15,000 people here for $100,000 a year. The way we're going to do it in New Mexico is through small business. So lots of cool stuff and lots of interesting things, and I'm happy to talk about it. And when we have some great experts here to continue to have a dialogue about it.
Thank you, Dr. DelCampo. I think that's a great point that Rob makes, which is, a lot of times in New Mexico, we want to swing for the home run, right? We want to hit the home run. We got to get the big company to come in. And I think we're overlooking a lot of times what's happening right here, right now. And I commend new Mayor Keller, because he's talked about, I want to keep growing and I want to focus on what we already have. We're going to talk, you're going to hear about that with FatPipe. HB, locally owned, been in business for 35, 40, 50 years here. Let's keep doing that. Let's keep talking and helping those here. Lisa.
Hi. So those of you who know my boss, Stuart Rose, know that he's, I guess I would call an active senior. He's definitely one of those people colliding into the future. I met Stu about 5.5 years ago when he had the concept for the BioScience Center. He was fairly new to town, owned Oso Bio at the time, actually had just sold it, and had some technologies he was licensing out of UNM and needed a place to set up shop. But when he came across, a vacant building that was about 20,000 square feet and had wet lab potential, he thought, I might have something here. I'm going to start an incubator. Well, everybody thought Stuart was crazy. I had a friend at Sandia who knew or had heard of him and suggested that I call him because he was looking for someone to help him run the BioScience Center. So I did. I sent him an email, and the next morning we met for coffee, and coffee literally turned into lunch, and we sat for almost an entire day on the stairwell of the building that he was considering buying for the BioScience Center. What we determined that what he thought he needed was a scientist to run the labs, but I convinced him that what he really needed was a network. And I'm a lifetime resident. I had owned a software development company from 2001 to 2010, and I had been chair of the New Mexico Tech Council for 8 years. And I learned from running my own business that the only way to be successful as an entrepreneur is to network. So I had a pretty good network, and I felt like I could help him. So I put a proposal together. He wouldn't offer me any sort of job. I had to write my job description and how much I should get paid. And I submitted, I did my research, and it was a very fair proposal. But he came back and said, this is fantastic. You're exactly the type of person I need, but I'm a startup and I can only afford half of what you're asking for. And half of what I was asking for was the salary I made when I graduated from college. And as a single mom, it wasn't going to pay the mortgage for very long. However, I saw something in Stuart and knew that he was somebody I should take a risk with. And I had a consulting company. I said, fine. And it was bringing in a little bit of income. I said, I will come to work for you part-time, but I'm going to bring my business to the BioScience Center, and I'll work out of the BioScience Center, and I'll be there all day, but I'm only going to work for you part-time. He said, fantastic. So we filled up the BioScience Center in about 8 months. We had capacity in all of our labs, and then we had to start renovating more offices into lab space because there was such demand. And we continued to stay at 100% occupancy at the BioScience Center. So which is it's a true incubator for startups in biotech and life sciences. Most of our companies deal with pharmaceutical research or medical devices. We have a water company. We actually have a solar company because Stu invested in them and he wanted them in his building. We have some software development companies. So there's a couple of different types of companies there. Then about 2 years into that endeavor, he was involved in the whole Innovate ABQ concept. He knew what was going to be happening down here in the innovation corridor, and he wanted to kickstart it off. So Stuart is one of those people who puts his money where his mouth is. He leads private sector. He has never asked for money, and that is the cool thing about his operation. So we started FatPipe ABQ originally as a incubator for high-tech startups, and then realized we need to be co-working and all-inclusive and bring in all different types of entrepreneurs, because it's better when the creatives work with the high-techies, who work with the nonprofits, who work with the seniors and the teens giving tech support, right? So that's been a really fun project. He's trying to expand his model statewide. One of the funnest things that Stu does at FatPipe ABQ is a program called It's Never Too Late to Innovate. So he too believes that there are retirees and active seniors who have time, talent, and treasure to share, and he does everything he can to get them back into the workforce. Sharfi, raise your hand, Sharfi. You come quite a bit. He's one of our regulars. We do it on a monthly basis. We serve breakfast. And basically, it's just a presentation on all of the resources that are available to people in the Albuquerque area. I see my job as a connector. I'm here to help people connect, whether they need co-founders or people to work for them or clients or maybe they want to invest in a company. We've had a couple of older people come in who have, some treasure to share and they want to invest in companies, so they do that. I had one woman who was a nurse who was doing diabetes care. I made an introduction to a company at the BioScience Center, and they wrote her into a grant application to give her some work. So that sort of synchronicity happens all the time. And the cool thing about getting people out and talking to each other is you never know when those connections are going to be made, and it's so important. So I feel like that's the best compliment to the discussion that we're having tonight is our Never Too Late to Innovate program.
That sounds like a great program. I also caught, I don't know if you guys did, but I love that word, funnest. Funnest, right? We got to keep those kind of words going, because a lot of times I think we lose sight of, hopefully we're having a little fun when we're doing all these things, right? It may be hard work and it may be, a lot of stress, but let's make sure we're having some fun. And to have Lisa use that word and have people bringing together, I think that's cool. I like that. I'm going to remember that. I would probably say funner, which isn't a good word. Funnest is better. Be like my wife. Thank God Robin's on there. She's like, shut up right now. You're using bad English, Lonnie. Anyway, thank you, Lisa. And then last but not least, again, Brian Terrell with HB Construction. Let's talk a little bit about, your development of talent and training and what you're seeing in the marketplace today, Brian.
Sure,
Thanks.
absolutely. As Lonnie said, my wife of 20 years, Carrie, she's a New Mexico native. I'm a Texan. Unfortunately, I'm never going back. I've been here in Albuquerque for 7 years. I love it here. And we have two startups. We have a 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. So we are going through the typical cycle you go through with children, and it's similar to business as well. I mean, I think if you look at the growth of any business, there are very predictable phases that it goes through, and I think when you're particularly in that startup phase, you'd think, oh, well, I'm not really in that stage. Well, you probably already are. You just don't realize it yet. And I think as you move through those different cycles, there are different ways people can contribute to your sustainable growth there. And so HB Construction, the company that I work for now, very proudly for about 2 years, founded in 1991, Albuquerque based, but essentially we've gone through almost all of those stages very quickly. So in 2011, I think it was 11 million in revenue and 10 employees. We're now probably this year going to do about 180 million in revenue with about 170 employees. So that's pretty, we've kind of gone like this. And we're experiencing the glory and the thrill of that growth, and also the struggles of moving through those stages. And I think that what I like about this topic and what I like about we're trying to create here is that, there are opportunities on both sides of this. I guess collision is what we're calling it. But I think on the startup side, particularly as you're going very quickly through those stages, to have the opportunity to have people like what I call scar tissue, people who've sort of been through some of the battles and experienced some of the tough stuff that happens in different stages of growth. I think that's a great opportunity to link up with some of that knowledge, particularly as you start to formalize different processes, things around finance and operations and process and procedures. None of the things you worry about when you've got this amazing idea and it's taking off, but eventually you get to that stage where you need it. And I think that's a great opportunity on that side. I think the caution on that side is, if you've been into this business for a year and a half and it's taking off and you're 27 years old and someone who's 57 is in there to help you, they're going to see things a little bit differently. They're going to probably be a bit more cautious at times. They're going to want to think things through a little bit more. And I think that's a struggle in ways, but it's ultimately where the melding of those two together is what makes it powerful. And we see it a lot in construction. I mean, construction is an industry with a massive gap between very skilled, very knowledgeable people, sometimes in their 60s and later, and then 20 and 30-year-olds. And in between there is a massive gap. And our most successful teams, when we can pair that deep knowledge and experience and that scar tissue of people, along with the energy and innovation and the drive to kind of make things better. And we've had real success with that. I think it translates over to business, of any kind of business. I think, I guess I'll talk about what to me would be important on the side of the startups is you can get good deals with these people. Because a lot of times they're in a different stage of their life, where different things matter. Maybe they're in a point where they have a pension or they have certain kinds of benefits, or their prime earning years, they're sort of at the end of that. And now for maybe a reasonable price, you can really tap this amazing knowledge that's there. And so I would encourage, as we talk about today and with the other panelists, is how can we make more of those links? Because I think it really can make for powerful organizations. So,
and I love Brian's analogy between our kids, right? So the startup phase with our kids is they're born, and you're like, okay, God, I'm a new parent. I'm starting this whole thing called parenthood, and then you try to get them to that stage where Robin and I are at, which is we're kicking them out, right? They're done. They're old enough to do their own thing, but then they sometimes come back, right? Or they sometimes call and say, I need some money, and you're like, okay, so you never. But the more experience you have, I can tell you, I feel much better as a parent at 54 than I did at 32. And thank God I had people around me. And to give a little credit to HB and the company Brian works for, so the two owners now are Adam and Jason Harrington, 40 years old. One of them's 40, I think the other's 38, maybe. And they took over from their father, Ken, who had the company since 91. And they went through, and he was always there to help them. Well, the bank I work for, we're in the same boat as HB. We have banking has a large contingency of people who are at the end of their life cycle for work and banking, and a bunch of new people coming out who are saying, I want to get involved. And so it's a big gap that we've got to help close. And I think the more that we can bring those two together, like we're hearing from everybody here, the easier that transition is for all of us. And it just keeps sort of that perpetual cycle going, right? Because it's gaps that cause disruption, and disruption which causes at times, I think, lack of continuity, if you will, for that business to keep going. So I really appreciate all the intro comments. So like what I'd like to do now is just sort of open up to all of you. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? And how can these guys help you with that? And then what we've always seen happen is sometimes if one of these esteemed panelists can't, maybe someone in the audience can, and I'm open to that too. So with that, we'll open it up. If there's a first sort of question that may be on your mind, we can get them to give a little insight to it. Yes, ma'am.
Are some of these companies willing to, for example, I don't want to work full time.
Right.
Let's say I only want to work 4 or 5 hours a day. Are they willing to do something like that?
Right. So the question is, if a person wants to have a flexible work schedule, right? They don't want to work full time. They've already done the full time thing. They just want to get out of the house. Is that a viable option? So maybe start with Lisa, because she actually started that way too, even though she wanted full time. She was only offered part time. But let's start with that.
Well, my answer would be absolutely. I think even some of the full-time employees wish they had part-time work. But yeah, most startups are willing. Trish is a really good example with teen years. They're willing to work with people part-time. It's such a great benefit to us to have the talent and the knowledge that we wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. So absolutely. I know lots of companies who'll take them part-time.
And let me jump in here. So I would say that it's interesting. Again, you talk about the similarities between the different groups, or among the different groups. So if you're looking at millennial, Gen Z type folks, and you're looking at baby boomer type folks that are retiring, the baby boomer people want to work 4 or 5 hours a day, maybe not even that, because they're interested in work-life balance. That's not one of the number one priorities of the millennial, Gen Z folks. So they understand that, right? They get it and value that sort of thing, right? What they're looking for is that balance. Now, they realize you got to work hard. Doesn't mean less work, but it just means maybe less burnout. So that understanding of, hey, that's what I want to do too, totally get it. I want to be you in 40 years. Makes sense.
Well, and I think a lot of workforces today aren't tied to a desk anymore, right? In the old days, you would go into work and you'd go to a desk and you'd be at that desk and you get your 15-minute break. Now, there still are some obvious businesses that has to happen. So in banking, we still have tellers, right? Someday maybe we won't. They'll all be video. I don't know. But for the at least foreseeable future in my career, I see people being serviced at a teller line, right? So they have to be there during core hours. But in our operations group and in our IT group, there is some flexibility. So I think as these companies we're talking about, startups, a lot of times I suspect they probably don't care where you're at as long as you're able to support, help, and do the job. So I don't know. Construction's probably a little different. You probably need to be there to swing the hammer.
It's different, but what I would add to that maybe is not think of it as kind of traditional employment. I am hiring you to come work for me for this job to be paid this. I mean, I think one of the approaches is what's one issue you're trying to solve, and maybe it's a short-term consulting agreement of some kind. And because ultimately it's about fit and the chemistry to be able to work together effectively. And I think if you could come in and solve one issue and maybe make a difference there and provide some value, then it might turn into a different kind of employment. But I think a short-term agreement to work on one issue and make some progress would be another approach versus just employ me.
I'll throw maybe Jill on the spot real quick because she has an HR and consulting firm. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of out in the marketplace today from an HR perspective in terms of the question that this young lady asked?
What we're seeing with applicants is the request for part-time, and so it is taking employers to a place where they have to be willing to massage their traditional work setting from a full-time position to perhaps a shared position. So you've got 2 people
Right.
that do the job instead of just one.
That's a great concept. I mean, we're
And
seeing more of that too.
rooms of talent
Right.
by doing that. 2 different brains, 2 different areas of expertise. It's pretty powerful.
In the tech industry, frankly, we have employees who work full time and then freelance. You know, they work evenings and weekends to freelance, keep up their skills on other projects. So they're working tons of hours.
Yeah, I don't think people are afraid of number of hours anymore. I think they want enriched hours, right? The right hours. So that's what I'm hearing, the quality. Yes, ma'am.
How much interest is there on the reverse, where you have the senior who has the hobby they want to turn into their startup, but they don't want to spend the time to establish all that business. They want a young person to help do a lot of the legwork.
That's Stuart Rose. Stuart Rose has the vision, he has an idea, and he finds somebody to implement. And he's got 16 companies right now, and I only run a couple of them.
Okay.
Yeah, outsourcing the legwork is something we typically see a lot with students, for example, right? So when we can make those connections, it's positive. You got a lot of people with a lot of ideas and not necessarily the implementation skills to do that sort of thing. And it's really the whole idea behind technology transfer too, right? You got somebody invents something and they're interested in inventing stuff. They're not interested in making it into a business. So there is some opportunity out there. It's a little, making those matches is sometimes hard to do, but it's out there.
Thanks. I'm being asked to walk now. I love walking, so please.
Well, you talk about startup. I want to ask you about a re-startup. If you've been in business and due to afflictions, cancer, and all this other stuff, you had to stop, and now you're trying to store it back. How does one store it up again? Restore it.
So we got to restart. How would you guys visit restarting?
Well, without knowing what the business is, I'd say start using your network, right? You got to get out there. What's the business?
Real estate broker.
Oh, seems like it would be, everybody needs real estate people, and something that you can walk away from for a while and come back as long as your licensing is still in play, right?
But it's a great opportunity too to re-energize your business and maybe reinvent it as well. So again, if we're talking about colliding between the generations, is not just focusing on the same way you did it, before, and now that you're restarting, is reinvigorating it. What are the new needs? What do all these millennials that what kind of houses are their parents going to buy for them, because they're not going to buy their own, right? Well, but I mean the model has changed a little bit, right? So that was a little bit of a dig. I'm sorry, I had to put something in there, but
a bit of truth in that at some level.
Well, and new ways to market, right? I mean, I have a real estate agent who's still doing flyers, and it just kills me. I have a building I'm trying to sell. I should probably just help him sell it, but more social media. Get out there on the platforms that people are using.
And the resources that are here today too are great places to start too. I see West is back there, SVDC, and those types of folks. Visiting with them for a couple of minutes can get you pointed in the right direction as well. We got tons of resources in this community, which is what's great. And we keep replicating them sometimes, but you got some of the best here. So
I like that comment about possibly partnering with someone who's new to the business in the generation today, who understands all the tools of the trade, if you will, not the flyer trade, not the paper trade. Even at the county, we've had to adjust, right? They're big on doing press releases, okay? Well, I don't know anyone under the age of 50 that reads the paper much anymore. Really, they get it on their phone, and they don't even know what a press release is. They know what a Twitter is. They know what a Snapchat is. They know what a whatever else can come in like quickly and just a quick blurb, right? So if they got a press release, they'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So hold on, sir. I've got Trish here real quick. Trish.
I just wanted to add to what Lisa and Brian were saying, because not only are our 12 teen years who are active at the moment part-time contractors, but they're also, they get to work whatever schedule they want. It's kind of like what I think was so brilliant about Uber. There's a lot of people that want to work, but they need it to be around their schedule. And if their schedule has to be 9 p.m. to midnight, then that's what works. And that's what works for a lot of us that are coming home on a flight or whatever and need a ride. Also, right now, I'm looking for an admin assistant. And I've been really big on trying to get it out to the world of older adults who are willing to work part-time. Definitely part-time is huge in the startup world because we can't afford full-time people. And so I love the idea of hiring a retiree, because theoretically they have their retirement and this isn't their sole income. And because we can't afford benefits right now. And most startups can only say, I can project out that we can pay you for 6 months for sure. After that, it might be month to month. We'll just see. So one thing I do wish we had, and I've been thinking of offering this to Lisa's, except I don't want to overextend myself, is creating a Facebook page for the Never Too Late to Innovate crowd, because I would love to get the word out to them when we're hiring or when we need someone. And right now I'm not sure who to get it out to. I put this ad on Indeed.com, not even an ad, Indeed.com for the job description. Next day I had 15 19-year-olds applied for this part-time position. Did what I could to get it out to our newsletter and everyone else in the older adult world, and I got 6 applicants. And so having a connection of how we can all group those people and bring them into the fray would be awesome.
Consider it done. I have an intern starting Monday, and we'll give her that as a project.
Look at that. God, I love things like this. We're solving problems every minute.
Hi. I guess I'm going to talk from the other end of the spectrum as a millennial, as much as I don't want to admit that I'm a millennial.
It's okay. It's okay.
I am one, and moved to Albuquerque about 1.5 years ago. Been working in the tech scene, and there seems to be a couple of journalists in town that seem pretty adamant to proclaim that New Mexico is the worst place for millennials, right? You know, I think some of us saw an article recently about that. There's a lot of negativity around that, and so I wanted to ask the panel, what have you guys seen in your different industries, the changes companies are making in order to kind of appeal to this new generation that's going to start leading up things? So thank you so much.
I'd like to start with Brian because HB, I don't know who runs their social media, but has done a phenomenal job at getting the word out of the people they're hiring, who they're hiring, and what they bring to the table. So maybe start with Brian, what you're seeing in the force, like what Daniel's talking about.
She's a millennial, first of all, the one who's doing that, so that certainly
She
helps.
gets it. She understands.
I think what we see, particularly in how to appeal to and ultimately retain millennials, we have a lot of new graduates coming straight out of school, and A is communication. I mean, they want to be communicated with constantly in ways that maybe we're not used to. It sounds like it's feeding back.
Maybe.
But more importantly than that, I think it's kind of a feedback loop. And what we've found that is the old style of, you got a job, so now, shut up and go do it for a while and we'll talk in 6 months, is just not effective. I mean, we really have to more frequently and I would say more directly give people feedback on how they're progressing through their early careers. And that seems to be probably most a critical thing that we do. And that doesn't have to be a formal process with lots of forms and software to do it. It really just comes down to managers and supervisors understanding that this is how this particular generation really drives, and this is how you're going to get the best performance out of them. And that's hard for some older people who just don't, they're like, you got the job. I don't owe you anything else now, and that's a struggle. But most of the people in these more senior roles with us, we've spent a lot of time talking to them about that and getting them to do it, and I think that's probably the most effective thing we've done so far.
Daniel, I appreciate your comment about, unfortunately, a lot of times, the story is led with the negative, right, rather than the positive, and we see that a lot here. And I tend to try to go the other way and lead with the positive. And so, yes, okay, right, maybe we aren't Denver or Austin today, but we've got Daniel who decided to bring his career here. So why don't we talk to Daniel and say, hey, Daniel, why did you want to do this? The reality is, let's just be real, right? We don't have as many opportunities yet. However, we have opportunities. We just need to make people aware of them, and we need to let them know why and how and where they're at. And I think that's where all of us can get better at that, specifically leading with that. Tom and I were talking right before this about that. Hey, let's figure out a way to lead with that. Hey, let's go get 20 millennials and have them say why they're here, right? And it can't be just because they want to go down on Central on Saturday night. Okay, that's fine. That's every freaking 25-year-old in any town. That's what they want to do, be around like-minded people and congregate. Happens to be Central, Brewery, whatever that street is in your town. But let's also say why you chose it here. I think that's a big thing.
I was going to follow up on that, and I think, and I was obviously teasing about millennials, but they get a bad rap. But the reality is that it's up to 40% of the workforce is going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And there are not enough Gen Xers to fill those jobs. So it's going to be millennials that are going to be elevated very quickly in organizations like yourself. So we need to respond to some of the needs and preferences that millennials have. And I think a lot of the organizations here are nimble enough to be able to do that. Yes. And even the large sort of cruise ship in a canal organizations that we have are thinking about that as well. And some of the things we think about is constantly recruiting your own employees, right? It's not just you're hired, that's good, I'll see you in a couple weeks when your thing is done. But this isn't anything that's new, it's just good management practices that don't go out of style. So if we have good, solid organizations in our community, which we do, like HB Construction, like BioScience Center, all these folks, they're thinking about this and they know what to do. So millennials respond to that sort of thing. They're looking for a work-life balance, and they're looking to be valued, right? They want to be important. The people that leave organizations tend to be the high performers because they have opportunities, and then the low performers because they kind of stink and you got to get rid of them. So there has to be something else keeping good people in organizations. And with the growth of the millennial group and the decrease in the number of baby boomers in the workforce, that match is going to become even more important.
I think it takes all of us in situations like this walking away and saying, how can I help change the narrative? How can I help change the message? And how can I get that message out? And it's got to be, I think of my kids, and you hear the tweet and the retweet, and I know I use that a lot, but that's what they're doing. Instagram, DM messages, all these things. And it is viral in nature in terms of how when someone hears something. I think we need that for jobs. And we don't see it. We don't see it. Indeed, which is .com, okay, great, you go there, or you go to ZipRecruiter, or you go to these places. But no, we need pushes out. And I think Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, those are all the ones that are literally, at least when I talk about my kids from age almost 26 to 18, that's all they're doing. Right. That's all they're doing. And when an event comes up, it's like wildfire. We've got to do that with jobs. What do you guys think?
I totally agree. First of all, leading with the positive, Holly's teams in the SBI thing regularly finish in the top 3 in the country. So she's a great person to talk to about that. She's amazing. So she's a huge asset to that. But absolutely. But again, we can't be afraid of using the existing social media thing. So another thing we haven't pushed out very well, Facebook, April 26th, right, is coming here for a week of free training for anybody that wants to use all types of social media, right? Location to be determined, but just because of the social media world, they kind of wait till
Lobo
very end to
Rainforest.
push it out. Yeah, exactly. Well, we've offered.
FatPipe, HP training rooms. We got plenty of rooms. Southwest Capital Bank.
Exactly.
Bring them anywhere.
Exactly.
We'll all host them.
But that stuff's out there, and we can't be afraid of it, right? Like you said, like Facebook. You ask my students, are you on Facebook? They're like, Facebook is for old people, is what they say. But there's a little bit of a give and get. Just like we need to kind of come meet the millennials in the middle, right? They need to kind of understand that it's not always about social media for everybody as well. But there can be that training. It's a great opportunity to see the generations collide.
I think Brian mentioned something about communication. I mean, talk about communication a little bit, because this is what we're dealing with, right? Getting the word out, changing the narrative, talking positive. It's all communication. And most of us in this room, my wife knows, everyone knows, I'm a talker. Okay, so it's never going to be hard for me to talk. Now, whether or not you like what I say or you understand what I say, that's another story. But communication, how can we? What do you think about that, Brian? I'm not going to ask. I'm going to ask what you think.
I think you mentioned ZipRecruiter, and that's from a recruiting perspective, it's a very good tool. What we've seen is we can put it on ZipRecruiter, but then when we tweet out, because it's linked to Twitter, our ZipRecruiter account, when it goes out on Twitter, that's when we really get the big responses. So just listing it on a job board somewhere is not enough. It's got to be then backed up with other social media. Yeah. That makes a big difference in our case.
Huge. Lisa.
John Mirzwa and I, through Ingenuity Software Labs, have started an initiative that we've named DART. And our goal is, like the New Mexico True campaign has done for the tourism and hospitality industry in New Mexico, we want to make New Mexico known as the best value for software developers. People shouldn't be offshoring to other countries when great talent sits right here in New Mexico. And as a result of the Deep Dive Coding Bootcamp and other programs, we've got now software developers who are no longer beginners. These are mid-level and working into senior level jobs, and there's great talent. And Sandia doesn't want to hire him because they don't have a 4-year degree. That's great. I'm going to hire him. All of the local software development companies are going to hire these people. And our marketing effort, hopefully, will be as big as New Mexico True with the partners that we're bringing online to let people know that New Mexico is a place you need to come if you need software developed, because our talent is just as good as any of the people in San Francisco or DC or New York. But we're a lot more affordable, and we can bring better value.
Charles Ashley, thank you. Let's give it up for Lisa. Charles Ashley started cultivating coders because he's like, how can we get them started? And they can graduate from that into Ingenuity software, or Tom's going to bring up something. But again, teen years, all of these places, we have the talent. That's the other misconception. Well, I don't have the talent. You know, people, Facebook, oh, they're only going to hire 30 people. No. They may only hire 30 people, but they've got 1,000 people down there right now working to build that freaking big data center. So let's not just focus on one thing. Let's look at the entire picture. Let me get to Tom real quick.
So there is a tech hiring fair coming up, and I think that's a step in the right direction. A couple years ago, I went up to Colorado for an event with a company called Built in Colorado, and they are making money, but I went to this event, and it was a hiring fair. They had big companies and small companies there. There were 1,000 people there. Almost all of them were millennials. And we need to do more things like that. I think that the Tech Council could aggregate the jobs more. Someone needs to put all the jobs in one place. And, you know, Built in Colorado does charge the companies for that, but they do an amazing marketing job of what's going on, who are the companies, what are they hiring for. They'll do a newsletter where they'll profile 3 CTOs, tell everyone their background, where they're, you know, we need to do a better job of that.
The Tech Council has a new millennial president, and he is eager to grow. I mean, Nika Allen did an amazing job, and Dean Gallagher is going to be just as good. And so you should tell him about your idea, because I'm sure he'd run with it.
I saw someone had their hand up a minute ago. Yes, ma'am. Be right there.
Hi. I'd like to go back to the restarting a business, okay? I came here from Colorado, had a successful photography event company, and I've tried to sort of start it here, and you know, I can't get the momentum. So you talked practically about how, you know, a new marketing technique, Facebook. What's the practical way of maybe reaching out to the university, you know, the MBAs, that type of thing?
So there's 2 really quick things that you can do at very low cost that are super effective. So number 1, Innovation Academy has an internship fair twice a year. It's free to come. Anybody can come. You don't have to pay the interns. We give them 3 credits. Hopefully your intern that starts is getting credit. We'll hook that up.
In
if
high
not,
school.
Oh, dual credit we can do. You can do dual credit. And then the Small Business Institute at University of New Mexico, sbi.unm.edu. For $500, your business can be an MBA team project. And they work on that, whether it's a marketing need, whether it's a business plan sort of thing. Now, they got to pick you, right, because they get hundreds of applications. But if you can go in and pitch it to them and get excited about it, they'll do it. And I think they have some grants for startup companies as well.
Okay. It's like I have all the assets, the shell, I have the business, but no business.
Are you in business right now in Albuquerque?
Yeah, you know, on paper.
Yeah.
I just don't have clients, you know.
Are you providing a service right now in Albuquerque?
Yes.
Apply to pitch or present at 1 Million Cups.
That's another good one.
So 1 Million Cups is the weekly event we do at FatPipe ABQ, sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. And each week, 1 or 2 companies get 6 minutes to present. The idea behind it is that you come as an entrepreneur who is vulnerable. You need help with something, and you're asking your community for help. It's not a pitch for money. It's not a, this is what I do, this is why I'm so great, and this is what I can teach you. It's, I really need to get my photography business off the ground, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
That's a great idea.
And then the audience spends 20 minutes providing feedback, and the networking is amazing.
So let's close. Dr. DelCampo, a few closing comments. We'll go down and then we'll get into our roundtable discussions, which is good. Just another hour after this. Small groups talking about topics that are important to you. So, yeah. Dr. DelCampo?
Closing statement, I would just say that, you know, I think you guys have all brought it up, and I hope my millennial teasing was taken in jest, but because we could talk about Gen Z and then it gets really crazy, right, the next year. But anyway, but New Mexico is a really diverse place where, for the most part, you've seen a lot of different cultures work together pretty strongly to create a pretty strong environment, right? but we don't necessarily view the different age groups as different cultures, but they really are. So if we can sort of reframe our mind to realize that as we see cultural differences among the Native, Hispanic, white, Black, Asian communities, that we also have these differences among age groups, but they all also have great things to contribute to different projects and different companies and different ideas and all sorts of things. So, we've done such a good job addressing diversity in our community. If we could just enlarge that sphere just a little bit more, I think that we can really gain a lot more benefit even in our community.
That's a great point. Expanding that population and that language. I like that. Thanks, Dr. Lisa.
I feel privileged to work for a gentleman who should have retired, probably 10 years ago, and he will never retire. And he's been the best mentor I've ever had, and every single day I learned something from that man. So I believe in it, and if you want to get involved, you just need to show up and start networking and, tell people what you need, because everybody's willing to make that connection for you.
Great point. Thanks. Brian, close us out, man.
I will. I'd like to say I learned a lot from Rob and Lisa today. I mean, I think the resources are there, and I'm sort of in an isolated private business and not exposed to a lot of the other things that are out there, and then I'm encouraged by it, and pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks. I appreciate everyone. Let's give it up for our panelists. And to all of you, thank you, first of all, for coming out on a school night, if you will. I appreciate that, and spending some time with us. I hope that you found value in this, but to the point of the panelists too, don't let it end with this, right? Don't take one stop, one obstacle. Trust me, there are so many resources. Call my office, call Dina's office, call Treasurer Burses, call anybody, call somebody, right? I mean, we all have resources, and it's about sparking sort of that conversation, getting it going. And then when you leave tonight, if you would, just make a promise to at least do one thing positive tomorrow. One thing positive tomorrow that is different than what someone else did that probably started with negativity. And if we can do that, I think a little more, I think we'll start to see that change. Because yes, we can all talk about those things that are going on around us that are challenges, and we all have them. But if we start with talking about all those things that are good and optimistically that are going on, I think some people get uncomfortable with that. And we make them uncomfortable, and that's okay. We disrupt them, we make them uncomfortable, and we make them change their thought patterns. Thank you all very much. Thanks to the team. Roundtable, Sean's got a little comments. Thank you, Sean.